This computer. Right, the Book of Ruth. So the Book of Ruth is after Judges and before Samuel. And that'll make sense as we open up the Book of Ruth. It kind of gives us a context. And a lot of the books of the Bible will tell you either who their contemporaries were or what the king was or what time frame, or maybe it's during the carrying away of the Assyrians or the carrying away of the Babylonians. And you can see time frames and context of when specific people lived and wrote. And so the Book of Ruth, in chapter 1, verse 1, it opens up. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. So what time frame are we in for Israel?
Judges.
Book of Judges.
Right. Right. And I don't know if you know this, but Samuel is considered the last judge of Israel. Samuel was the one they came to, and they said, look, you're old and your sons, we don't trust your sons. We want a king. And so Samuel went to God, and God said, well, protest, because they're not going to like the king I give them. But if they insist, we'll give them a king. And the first king was Saul. Samuel anointed Saul. And then Samuel told Saul that God took the kingdom from him. And then he secretly anoints David. And eventually David becomes the king that, God wanted. Not a perfect king, but a good man for sure.
So went from judges to kings.
So Judges, with the last judge being Samuel, so books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, then Samuel appoints Saul to be the first king of Israel, and then David after Saul. Saul refused to do what God told him to do, made a bunch of excuses. He just wouldn't come clean and said, I sinned, I'm sorry. David sinned, but he came clean and said, hey, I'm sorry, and God forgave him. Psalm 51 is a wonderful psalm to read about after Nathan confronts David when he took Bathsheba and had Uriah killed. Okay, so it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. So this is both context and remote context. Context telling us where the Book of Ruth, when the Book of Ruth transpired. Remote context we have around it, the Book of Judges and the Book of Samuel, the last judge, are sandwiching the Book of Ruth. If you look at the last verse of the last chapter of Judges, it says in verse 25, right above the Book of Ruth, if your Bible's set up like mine. If not, it's Judges 21:25. It says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which is right in his own eyes. That's the environment that we're coming into. And people just did what they wanted to do. There wasn't a king. The judges, you see in the book of Judges that Israel would walk away from God. They'd go into captivity. They'd cry out to the Lord. God would raise up a judge to rule Israel. They would lead them into freedom. The judge would die. Israel would go back into worshiping idols, back into captivity, cry out to God. And this thing just was like the book of Judges is like a roller coaster of Israel, walking, not walking, walking, not walking. So we come into the book of Ruth. It's during the time of Judges. That gives us the context of Ruth because it's right there in verse 1, but also the remote context of the book of Judges and the book of Samuel. And a certain man, middle of verse 1, a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn or to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So there's a famine in the land, and this has happened before, right? Remember Joseph down in Egypt. His father sends his sons down to Egypt to get grain because there's a famine in the land. So this man Elimelech goes down to Moab because of the famine. He's looking for opportunity. He wants to make sure he can feed his wife and kids, 2 sons. Verse 2, and the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons was Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. Now it's interesting, Ephrathites. If you look at the last, look at Micah chapter 5. So not in the left, towards the New Testament, but not quite there. So let's see, where am I? Micah. Further back, yeah, Micah chapter 5. Where am I have a mental block here. Hold on. Jonah, Micah. Boy. So right after Jonah, Micah chapter 5. And in verse 2, we have the prophecy of the birth of Jesus Christ. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me, that is a ruler in Israel, whose going forth have been from of old and from everlasting. Talking about the coming of Christ, that he would be born in Bethlehem. So when Herod asked the wise men, when did you see the star? He then went to ask the priests and said, hey, where's Christ going to be born? And they told him he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And they quote that verse. So Elimelech was from Bethlehem, Ephratah, which is that same area, probably about 75 miles from Moab, but it's on the opposite side of the Dead Sea. So you either have to go up and around and down, or you have to go down and up, or you have to come across the Dead Sea to get from one to the other. And it doesn't tell us how they traveled, but they went from Bethlehem to Moab. Different nation, too. It's not part of Israel. Verse 3. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her two sons. Bad situation, but hey, you still got two sons, so you've got, you're living in a very patriarchal society where women really couldn't own land or couldn't, really be their own household per se, and a woman without some male relative to protect her was often in danger of being abused. So she ends up, the husband dies, but the two sons are still with her. Verse 4, and they took them wives of the women of Moab, and the name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. So, but they took women of Moab. Now, Moab has an interesting start. Look at Genesis 19. Remember when God told Abraham to get away from your father's house and to go into a land which I'll show you? And Abraham kind of listened. He left, but he took Lot, his nephew, with him. God specifically said, get away from your father's house and from your kindred to a land I'll show you. And he takes Lot with him. And in Genesis 19 and in verse 29. So this is right when God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah for the same things that we celebrate in this country today. Verse 28, and he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah and towards all the land of the plain and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. So Lot originally lived on the outskirts of town, but he pitched his tent towards Sodom, kind of meaning he had an affinity towards it. And then he ended up living in Sodom and Gomorrah. But still, the Bible declared him to be a righteous man, and God sent angels to get him out of there. Him, his wife, and his two daughters were fleeing, and the angel said, don't look back. The wife looked back. She ends up perishing. She dies because she disobeys. So it's just the father and his two daughters, and they're basically leaving with the clothes on their back. Verse 30, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his two daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his two daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink that wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with his father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, behold, I lay yesternight with the father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go in and lie with him, that he may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. The younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their fathers. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. and the same is the father of Moabites unto this day. The younger she also bare a son and called his name Ben-Ami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto these day. Both those people persecuted Israel pretty much the entire time. They were always against Israel, the Moabites and the Ammonites. And they wouldn't have even existed had Abraham not brought Lot with him. But he did. He disobeyed God. So when we disobey God, there are often consequences, sometimes generational consequences, because God knows better. And if we listen to him, then we don't get into the soup. Um, all right, verse 5. So back in Ruth 1:5, and Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman were left of her two sons and her husband. So Naomi is there in a foreign land. Her husband's dead, the two sons are dead, the two Moabitess wives are there, but it's just the three women. And this is a dire straits. This is a bad situation to be in. Sometimes you may find yourself in a difficult situation, a situation that you may think is unfair, or, why did God do this? Because there are times we don't know what God's plans are or why God's plans are. We're going to see out of this, God had clearly had a plan and did some amazing things. But during the time, I mean, you'll see Naomi deals with depression and, struggles with this and thinks that she's cursed to God. God never says that, but Naomi does. But you see, as they go through this and as they stay faithful, that God never forsakes them. But they don't see that right now. They see themselves in a dire situation. It's probably going to be maybe a week to 10 days, 12 days tops journey from Moab back to Bethlehem. Because again, they got to go around the Dead Sea. They're down below it or up above it. So they're going to take time. And again, women without men to protect them were often in danger. Even from the people they were traveling with, they could be in danger. So we'll read as we go on. Verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters in law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people and giving them bread. God delivered Israel like he always does. And she heard that. They weren't far away. Hey, things are going well in Israel. God's brought food in. Verse 7. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her two daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house, and the Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. You've been very good to my sons, and you've been very kind to me. And she's speaking a blessing onto these daughter-in-laws. She thought very well of these two. Verse 9, and the Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Talking about to get married again, not that because their husbands are dead now, they had no children. So she's praying that they will find rest, they will find a husband and a house, and that God will bless them and bring them into rest. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. It clearly was a great love between these women, between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-laws. They loved each other. Verse 10, and they said unto her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? There is a principle, not a principle, there is a law in the Old Testament that if a man died having no seed, his husband was supposed to take his wife as a wife and raise up seed and name it after the dead husband. And that it was the lawful responsibility of the brother, the near kinsman. Another kinsman could do it, but he wasn't bound to do it like the brother was. If there was a brother, he was bound to do it. There was I think it was Onan who refused to do it, and God did not think well of it, that he refused to raise up seed to his dead brother. But these women, and she's like, well, if I had a baby tonight, would you wait till they were old enough to marry? Verse 12, turn again, my daughters, go on your way, for I am too old to have a husband. I mean, in context, to have a husband and have babies, it's not likely. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight and should also bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. That is Naomi's perspective. And, she's gone through she's going through one of the roughest times that a woman could go through in that patriarchal Middle Eastern side. And I don't say patriarch in a negative way. A lot of times today, if you say something's a patriarch, oh, it's terrible. No, it's just the way things were. Men ran, a woman was typically defined by her family, by her husband or by her father, or but depend upon how she was living or where she was living, and she has nobody left, so she can't really even make ends meet, and there's no social safety net. Well, there is. When we get to Israel, we'll see there's one. It's nothing like we have today, but there is a social safety net in one sense, and we'll look at that. So she's telling them, look, go home to your mother's house, to your father's house. I don't. It's not going to go well if you go with me. Verse 14, they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. So she convinced Oprah to go back. Oprah. I want to say Oprah, but that's not right. That would be dyslexic. So Oprah. She convinced Oprah to go back, but Ruth clave unto her. Ruth would not leave her. Verse 15, and she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. So she converts and says, I'm not leaving you, and I will be, your people are now my people, your God is my God. Verse 17, where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. She didn't say my gods do. She said the Lord, Jehovah, do more to me. If anything but death parts me from you. The commitment and heart of this woman, Ruth, to her mother-in-law is just outstanding. She's just an amazing woman. And we'll see it holds true throughout the book, and even beyond this book. Ruth makes an impact well beyond her life, and we'll look at that as we get to there. Verse 18, 118. And when she saw that she was steadfast minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. She stopped trying to convince her. And the two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass that when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, is this Naomi? They remembered her. And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, which means bitter, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. God never calls her by that name. God never, there are many times when God changes somebody's name in the Bible, Abram to Abraham, Jacob to Israel. God never calls Naomi Mara. Naomi felt this way, that this is how, and it's not like her feelings are illegitimate. She's going through an extremely difficult time, and she can't see God's hand yet. It's, she doesn't see. All she sees is, I don't know if you've ever gone through I heard a teaching a while back about God walking you through the wilderness. And if you've ever been in a situation where it feels like, God, why? It just feels like nothing is coming to pass, that I'm looking to serve you. I'm looking to, do your will. And I just I can't get two sticks together to start a fire. But sometimes God does that. He did it for Israel for 40 years in the wilderness to prepare them to come into the promised land. Jesus Christ for 40 days in the wilderness, before his ministry kicked into full gear, he was tempted of the devil, and there was that time to prepare. So sometimes God walks us through that to get us to where he needs us to go, in a position, in a mental mindset, to be ready to receive from him. And I think we're going to see that with Naomi and Ruth, that God is in these terrible circumstances, and I don't believe that God killed her husband or her sons. This is part of life. There's death, and especially, you're foreigners in another nation. I don't. They don't. Doesn't say how they died, but they all died. Now she's left destitute, no means of support. One of her daughter-in-laws she convinces to go back. Ruth stays with her, and they come in, and they said, "Is this Naomi?" She said, "Call me not Naomi, but call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me?" The other thing to know is in the Old Testament, they were not allowed to mention the names of other gods. So they attributed everything to God, good and bad. It really wasn't until Jesus Christ revealed the devil and his workings that we understood that we have a personal adversary. So they just attributed everything to God, whether it was good or bad, because they weren't even allowed to mention. If the devil got his name mentioned for everything he did in the Bible, there might be more about him in the Bible than God. So, they didn't allow them to speak the names of other gods. She lays it at the feet of God, and she's clearly very distraught and even depressed at this point. Verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. So this would be this time, right now, March, April. The barley harvest was usually in March, April. And we're going to see how God made rules to take care of the poor, the widows, the orphans, the strangers, those from other countries. God had rules in Israel, and Israel was an agrarian society. I mean, they lived off of crops and cattle and animals. Chapter 2, verse 1. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. The word wealth is a bad translation. It's the word valiant. It's the same word used for the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31:10. Who can find a virtuous woman for prices above rubies? It's the greatest compliment to give to a person. The masculine is valiant. David in what was it, 2 Samuel 23, I believe, God lists 33 of David's valiant men. It meant they were not only brave, but morally upright. They were of good character. They believed God. And these were the guys, they were David's top guys. One of them was Uriah the Hittite, who David had killed because he wanted his wife. One of the 33 men that God lists as David's faithful men. That caused a lot of trouble in David's kingdom for really the rest of his life. That's another story. We'll get to that. If we get to Samuel, we'll look at that. There's some amazing records there. But this word, a man of wealth, is really a valiant man. He was considered a valiant man by God. Really, he's a type. Sometimes in the Old Testament, we see types of the coming of Christ. Here, we're going to see the kinsman redeemer, the man who redeems Ruth and Naomi is the kinsman redeemer. Jesus Christ does that for us. He buys us back from the hand of the adversary. Boaz is that example of what Christ would be when he comes. So Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of valor of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, go, my daughter. So there's a lot to unpack in here. First of all, the word corn just means grain, not like we think of corn. Ears of corn were discovered in America. There was no corn in the Middle East. But they called it corn because corn was the generic name for grain. We just read that the barley harvest was happening, right? So that's a type of grain. So if I simply said grain, it could be wheat, it could be corn for us, it could be barley. But because I said barley up above in verse 22 of chapter 1, we know that the corn, the grain we're talking about, is barley. That's the harvest. I can't go and glean corn from a barley field. It wouldn't work, right? So, and gleaning is God's plan to care for the poor and the destitute. Look at Leviticus 19, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus in the Old Testament law, 19, Leviticus 19, the gleaning of the field. In verse 9. So Leviticus 19:9, it says, and when ye reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. And thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord your God. This was his welfare program. Now you had to work, you had to go out in the field and pick it yourself, but it was there. Let me ask you this. How big of a corner did you leave? It's up to you. You
Right.
could have been very stingy and left a little tiny corner, or you could have been very gracious and left a large corner. But the other thing, not just the corners, the gleaning is once you went through a field, you were allowed to pass through it one time. You couldn't go back and recollect what was left behind. That was left for the poor as well, the gleaning of the field. So, and in the grapes, they said, don't pick every grape, leave some on there for the poor. How much did you leave depended upon your heart? You know, how much you wanted to bless the poor. But Ruth asked permission of Naomi to go do this. Look at the heart. She has such respect for her mother-in-law. You know, I'll go and do the work. She didn't say, hey, you want to come with me? Naomi is getting up in the years here, and Ruth is a younger, I don't think she was super young at this point, but let's say even if she married in her teens, if she married 16, they were there 10 years. She's at least 26 years old, maybe older. And she's going to go out and do this work so that they can eat because they don't have anything. They are destitute right now. Verse 3, and she went out and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was the kindred of Elimelech. We know that. Ruth doesn't know that yet. Neither does Naomi, that she's in Boaz's field or who Boaz is.
Wait a minute. Doesn't Naomi know who Boaz is? Because he was her kinsman.
She doesn't know that she's in his field. So I think she would know Boaz by name.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, oh yeah, I remember we used to see him when the cousins got together or something, you know, probably, but she doesn't know that Ruth is gone there. So, but that's where she ends up. And again, is that coincidence? I don't believe so. I believe it's God working in the situation. Verse 5. No, verse 4. Then behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. This is a godly man, a man who fears God, who loves God, who wants to do the right thing, comes out and he says a blessing to his reapers, the guys who are working in his field. Then said Boaz unto his servant that was over his reapers, whose damsel is this? So that goes to the foreman of the reapers. Whose woman is this? She would stand out. She wasn't dressed like she was likely dressed as a widow, so she would have widow's clothes or veil on, but she would be differently dressed than the typical Israelite woman because she was from Moab, so she would have stood out. So he goes and he asks the foreman, whose damsel is this? And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, it is the Moabitess damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. So he knew who she was. They knew who she was. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and she continued even from the morning until now, and she tarried a little in the house. After the reapers, it doesn't mean, I've heard someone teach this as if she wanted to go into where the reapers were reaping. At this point, that would be a very bold thing to ask, almost arrogant. After the reapers, when the reapers pass through, let me come behind you. And why are you asking? Well, because you could get beaten up, you could get raped, you could get, abused by these guys laboring in the field because you're an unprotected woman. So she asked the foreman, can I glean behind your reapers after they've passed through? Can I collect what they've missed? Um, Verse 8. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not and glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide fast by my maidens. See, she didn't even have other women she was with. She was literally on her own. Think of the brave heart this woman had. I mean, she knew that if she didn't do something, they were going to starve, and she had to take action. So she, with faith, stepped out, and God is blessing her. So Boaz says, stay close to my maidens. You now have company to be with that, and then he gives initial more information. Abide here fast by my maidens, verse 9. Let thine eye be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? Beat you, rape you, that they, hands off. When the boss says hands off, it's hands off. And this guy is the boss. And when thou art athirst, go into the vessel and drink of that which the young men have drawn. You don't have to go find a stream or a puddle or something to drink from. You can go to the bucket where the young men have drawn water, and you can drink from our bucket. She wasn't an Israelite. She was a Moabitess, but her reputation had preceded her. And Boaz is really being very kind and gracious. Verse 10. Then she fell down on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said, why have I found grace in thine eyes? Whew. That thou should take knowledge of me, seeing I'm a stranger. I'm not even of Israel, and you're being so kind to me. And Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath been fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thy husband, and thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wing thou art come to trust. I believe that's prophecy, that's Boaz is prophesying to her that God will fully reward you, right? Hebrews says it would be an unrighteous thing for God to forget your labor of love. That would be unrighteous for God. It doesn't go unnoticed. Her labor of love, clearly, that's why she's doing what she's doing. She loves Naomi. And for her husband, her dead husband, and her dead brother-in-law, or dead father-in-law, that she is the only one left that can help Naomi, and she is doing everything she can. And she left her own land. Think about that. It's not today. We don't think that much about it. Well, if I go back to my old neighbor in Brooklyn, there'll be some guys they're still sitting on the same bar stools I left them on 40 years ago, unfortunately. So there's still a hesitancy for a lot of people to go away from what they know. So it takes some courage to step out. And sometimes God is going to lead you places that you wouldn't go on your own. Like Peter to the house of Cornelius, right? That was a Gentile's house. Peter would have never went there unless God showed him a vision, right? Spoke to him plainly, gave him revelation. Paul to be the apostle to the Gentiles. Paul was a Pharisee. He hated the Gentiles, and yet he became the great apostle to the Gentiles. She leaves Moab and comes to Israel and claims Israel's people as her people and their God as her God. Verse 13, and she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me, and thou hast spoken friendly unto thy handmaid. Friendly is to the heart. You've spoken. This is probably the first time that Ruth has taken a deep breath and just felt maybe things are going to be okay. Because up to this point, it was literally hand to mouth. You would glean, you would eat what, if you're gleaning just the little bits and they're rounding the corners tight and they're not dropping a whole lot, you have to do a lot of hard work to get a very little bit of food. And you're literally eating it and going back out and trying to do it again. So this might be the first time in her mind she could kind of, take that breath and go, God is really here. For thou hast spoken friendly or unto my heart, unto thy handmaiden, though I be not like one of thy handmaidens. I'm not, I'm different. I know I'm not of Israel, you know. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither and eat of the bread and dip thy morsel in the vinegar, which, you know, was considered unheard of to eat with Gentiles. So Boaz accepts her as part of Israel to be able to eat at his, come to my table, take the bread that's here for my workers, you know, eat, drink of the water, dip it in the vinegar, dip it in the common dish. That is quite the honor to say that I consider you, you know, a daughter of Israel. And middle of verse 14, and she sat beside the reapers, and she reached her parched corn or grain, and did eat, and was sufficed and left. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean among the sheaves, and reproach her not. Even if she gets up even with you, leave her alone. She can do it. I'm giving her that freedom, and don't you say anything to her about it. Understood? I mean, his kindness to her is extreme. I mean, you see how God was kind to us when we were in that situation. When we were in dire straits and didn't know the Lord still. Go ahead, Annette.
So, wasn't it considered to be a sin to be eating with the Gentiles? And wouldn't he have been like cast out of the temple?
Well, Boaz had FU money. Sorry. Boaz also had a reputation. I mean, Boaz was considered a valiant man. And, you know, the fact that this woman had done so kind to Naomi and had forsaken her people and her gods, you know, it said, Boaz said, it's been fully revealed to me what you've done.
Yeah.
So that she was accepted by him as being part of Israel. You're right, because to go into the Gentiles and eat, no. I mean, you didn't even eat with strangers that were from Israel. You fed them, but you wouldn't sit. When you ate salt with somebody, it was a covenant.
Yeah.
And so he's inviting her to sit with the reapers and to eat. And then he commands her, even if she gets even with you, you don't say a word. She has my permission. In fact, verse 16, and let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her and leave them, that she may glean them and rebuke her not. You know, if you drop something, they might let you pick it up, but it's like, don't you do it. If you drop, in fact, drop it on purpose so that this woman gets enough and Naomi gets enough. This man, when you think of the word kindness, you know, actively beneficent, even in spite of ingratitude. Not that Ruth's not grateful, she clearly is, but kindness is that being beneficial to someone, giving them what they need, even, you know, even above and beyond. You see the kindness and grace of God in this man Boaz. Clearly he has gone above, because you're right, he could have said, oh, that's a Gentile, I'm not going to let her do any of this, I don't even want her in my field. But he didn't do any of that. He took the person, you know, and God talks about being kind to the orphans, to the widows, to the strangers. She's at least two of those three, and you know, she's a stranger and she's a widow. So God says, be kind to them. So Boaz is doing that, but he's doing so much more than the bare minimum. Because he's such a wonderful example of God's grace and mercy. Verse 17, so she gleaned in the field until evening and beat out that which she had gleaned. And it was about an ephah of barley, about 4.5 gallons of barley. You know, like think of a 5-gallon bucket. You know, she had about that much barley in it. And she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw when she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave it to her that she had to her that which she had reserved after she was sufficed. So she took a doggy bag home too for Naomi. She ate until she was full, and then they let her take some home. Took that home to Naomi. And think of what Naomi must have been thinking. She leaves really early to go out to glean with the reapers. And she's thinking, I bet you Naomi was praying for her, because it was too common for an unattended woman to be abused, to be raped, to be molested, to be, beaten, to be driven off, you could be killed. I mean, there was really nobody to protect you. So Naomi's waiting up, and I believe Naomi probably was praying for her. So when she comes back, here she is, and she's got an abundance of grain. For gleaning, it'd be an unheard of amount of grain. Verse 19, and her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today? And what wroughtest thou? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And he showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, the man is near of kin to us, one of our next kinsmen. So Naomi knew the name. She knew who he was. And she said, oh my God, God has been so, she's starting to see God's making a way. Ruth, I think when Boaz spoke to her, you can almost feel that breath of relief that things are going to get better. And now Naomi sees it too. Oh my God, God worked it out. So you're in Boaz's field. That's amazing. Verse 21, and Ruth the Moabitess said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. Because after the barley harvest comes the wheat harvest, and we'll see that as it comes up. But there were like 7 weeks of barley harvest. Can you imagine if she's bringing home this much barley every day? All of a sudden, there's barley to sell, and maybe you're paying rent now, or maybe you're living in a place that's not so bad, and things are beginning to look up, and God turned the tide for this desperate, really dire situation these two women are in. God turns the tide and begins to bless, because Ruth loved Naomi and would not leave her. Verse 22, and Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, and that they meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of the barley harvest. Like I said, about 7 weeks. And the wheat harvest, that would be around Pentecost, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. So she's working hard. This is not easy work. Boaz, I guarantee you, Boaz is seeing. My guess is Boaz probably visited his reapers a little more often after this. I don't think she must have been a pretty woman, because there's indication she could have picked somebody else. And Boaz was definitely an older than her, it sounds like from this. But as we read on, chapter 3, verse 1. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? Ruth has been seeking rest for Naomi. Now Naomi's going to seek rest for Ruth. She knows the culture. She knows the law. She knows what could be done here. So she's going to get involved to try to help Ruth, because Ruth has been just a wonderful daughter-in-law, Verse 2. And now is not Boaz our kindred, of whose maidens thou was? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. To winnow barley. So they would, beat the barley out, but you would end up with barley mixed in with chaff. And so they would do this at night when the cooler winds would blow. They would take a big, wide forked device, like a rake almost, but a little stiffer than what we do, with long fingers. And they would go into the pile of barley with the chaff and throw it up, and the wind would blow off the chaff, which was lighter than the barley, and the barley would fall to the earth. And after doing this enough, they would get a pile of pretty much just barley. And so that's what Boaz was going to be doing. He's going to be winnowing barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor. But make not thyself known unto the men, until he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie down. Thou shalt go in, uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. So she gives her a plan, and it's a godly plan, because he's going to ask Boaz to cover me with your mantle, which means to be under his protection. like you do that with a wife. And that's really what she's asking. Verse 7, and when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, who art thou? He's only a little startled. Hey, I've had a little bit to drink. I'm waking up with someone I don't recognize. It's not usually a good situation, but here it is. Who art thou? And she said, I am Ruth, thy handmaiden. Spread therefore thy skirt, thy mantle over thy handmaid, for thou art a nearest kinsman. Will you do for me the job of the kinsman redeemer? Now, part of what you don't hear, and this will come up as we read, Israel divided the land by lots, and each family had a lot that was theirs. So when Elimelech and his two sons, if they would have come back, there would have been land there in Israel for them that would have been theirs. Well, that land now goes to Naomi and really to Ruth, but they can't work it themselves. So she's saying, redeem me, spread your mantle over me. Verse 10, and he said, blessed be thou the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than in the beginning, insomuch as thou followest not the young men, whether poor or rich. You could have had your pick. I think she was a looker. You could have had your pick. A young man, rich or poor, you could have picked one, but you came to me. I think Boaz won her heart when he spoke so graciously and kindly to her. When she was in dire straits, he showed the kind of man that he was. And I think that won her heart. So Naomi sends her. She does this. Verse 11, and now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou hast required. For all the city of my people does know that thou art a virtuous woman. The highest praise you could give a woman, to call her a virtuous woman. I believe that the virtuous woman that we wrote about in Proverbs is written about Ruth. She is we'll see that she is David's great grandmother, and that she's in the Christ line. The Christ line flows through Ruth. And I think that here Boaz calls her a virtuous woman. Verse 12, and now it is true that I am the near kinsman. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Hey, I'm your second cousin. There's a first cousin, or maybe there's a stepbrother. I don't know. He goes, but there's somebody who's in line before me. Verse 13, tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto thee the part of the kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of the kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of the kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until morning. You're safe. Stay here. You don't have to worry anymore. I will take care of this. I'm going to do the right thing here. I have to talk to my kinsman who's in line before me. There was a secession apparently, and this man was in line before him. So stay the night. Don't go back. It's too dark. I don't want you, traveling the roads in the dark. Verse 14, and she lay at his feet until morning, and she rose up before one could know another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman was come into the floor. He didn't want her reputation to be tarnished. She came in for honorable purposes, and he didn't want people gossiping about her. So he said, I don't want to hear you guys say anything about this. So shut your mouths. And he was well respected, even among his crew. So nobody's going to just, go against him as this. Verse 15, he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when he held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. And she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And he said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. And she said, sit still, my daughter, until thou knowest how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in the rest until he hath finished the thing this day. He knows Boaz, and he's going to take care of business. Last chapter. Then Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. So the gate was where the judges would sit and where business would be done. So you went to the temple or to the tabernacle, if for religious or spiritual reasons, you went to the gate of the city for business reasons. So Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, of whom he said, Ho, such as one, turn aside and sit down here. And he turned and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit down. And they sat down. So he's got his 10 witnesses. He's got his nearer kinsman. He's second in line. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land which our brother Elimelech had. There's a parcel of land assigned to Elimelech. Naomi wants to sell it. And I thought to advertise thee, literally uncover thy ear. I thought to tell you about it. Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou will redeem it, redeem it. But if thou will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there is none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I'll redeem it. I'll take that. But Boaz is a businessman. Now comes the second part. And then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Oh, by the way, there's a wife attached to the field. If you buy the field, you have to take Ruth as your wife. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. I don't know what was going on in his life. Maybe he was getting ready to be married to somebody else, and this would have kind of screwed up his plans. But he tells Boaz, I can't redeem it, so you redeem it. He gives him his blessing there. Now, this was the manner in the former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing, for to confirm all things. A man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. So that there would be no doubt that this transaction had happened, this man would take his shoe off and hand it to Boaz to say, I have given you the right to redeem this land and to take Ruth as your wife, because he was the closest relative who could have done this duty. Wasn't bound to it like a brother was, but could have done and could have taken the land. He said, nope, I can't do it. Here's my shoe. So all 10, nobody's going to say, well, he gave him a shoe, so we know he agreed to it. So that was how they did it. Verse 8, therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto all the elders, unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilon and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of this place. Ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate of the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thy house like Rachel and like Leah, which did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthy in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. These women were also in the Christ line. They're kind of, intimating that she will build up Israel, that she has become part of that. Verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. She was married to her husband for 10 years and never had a child. And now they go in, God opens her womb. And he said unto verse 14, and the woman said unto Naomi, blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he said unto thee, a restorer of thy life and a nourisher of thine old age, for thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. Yeah, this virtuous woman, this wonderful woman named Ruth. She worked so hard to care for her mother-in-law, and you see the blessing that came back, a redeemer in her old age. God took care of both Naomi and Ruth and went so far above and beyond that she shows up in the Christ line. Verse 16, and Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. And the woman, her neighbor, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Ruth was David's grandmother. That's just amazing. Now, these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nahshon, Nahshon begot Salem, Salem begot Boaz, Boaz begot Obed, Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David.
Easy for you to say.
No, it's not. Those I have to work on those names. But what a story, and what a encouraging story to know when you're going through difficult times. We think about Ruth and Naomi. We think about Israel going through the 40 years in the wilderness. Sometimes God has to lead us through the valley of the shadow of death. I don't want to go in there. But if the answer to my prayer is on the other side of the valley, I have to let God walk me through the valley of the shadow of death. And if I'm walking with him, there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of. God clearly cared for these women, even when, he set up the system for gleaning so that they would be away. But Naomi couldn't have come back and done that. She was older and she wouldn't have been able to handle the rigors of gleaning. So Ruth, she dove into it to do the right thing, to care for Naomi. And then Naomi, knowing the law and knowing the culture, did the right thing and told Ruth what to do. And Ruth was humble enough to listen to her mother-in-law and to do as she was told. And Boaz was flattered that she would come to him as an honorable woman and ask, redeem me, be the kinsman redeemer, play the part. And so he did. And so we have the wonderful record of Ruth during the time of Judges. I think it's one. I think it might be the only book in the Bible written from a woman's perspective. I don't know if Esther is. I don't know that Esther is written from that. Esther's another just amazing book about Queen Esther. You get the great verse, "Who knows if you were born for such a time as this?" We sometimes hear people say that verse. Do you know God may have brought you here for this? Clearly, God did that with Ruth. And God knew from before, they even met Ruth, that Ruth would end up in Israel and be part of the Christ line. God has foreknowledge. He knew the whole, and he worked with them. Naomi couldn't see it. She said, I left full, I came back empty. And yet, God didn't see it that way. God never calls her Mara. He calls her Naomi, always. Never changed her name, refused to acknowledge that. And because Ruth was such a virtuous woman and worked so hard, Boaz honored that and blessed her with grace upon grace. And then she chose Boaz as the kinsman redeemer. He did it, he did everything right. He talked to the guy who was one step closer. Nope, I can't do it. Here's my shoe. You do it. And God blessed them. And out of them came Obed, and then Jesse, and then David. So that's great. That would be great. Wouldn't that be? Let's see. Naomi, Obed, Jesse, David. Yeah, she'd be the great grandmother of David, right? Yeah. It's just an amazing book. It gets me emotional because when you think of people going through, if you meet someone who's in dire straits, be kind. Be kind. Don't. Sometimes there's a little bit of Pharisee in all of us, and sometimes you can go, oh, that person, they're a drug addict, so they deserve it. Well, probably somebody you love is or has been a drug addict. Somebody I love was one, and God showed mercy upon mercy. So when we see people in difficult, dire situations, pray for them, but help them if you can. If you can help them, help them.
They're there, but for the grace of God.
Right.
That was me. Yeah.
Right. And when we go through these difficult times ourselves, and maybe it is where you're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe it's where, you're okay financially, but you're struggling spiritually, or you're struggling relationship wise, and we're looking for God to open doors. God has not left you. He might be preparing you for your next season, because there are clearly seasons in our life, things that change as we change. And God opens doors, so I was so convinced that God had that perfect job for me that when it didn't happen, I was a little heartbroken. I didn't know what to think. I was like, God, So now this other one's opened up, and I think I'm doing my presentation next week to a group of people I've interviewed with, and then I got one more interview, my sixth interview.
Wow.
Yeah, so because 7 would be excessive.
You think?
You know.
Um,
Well, there could be another interview, so don't even say that. This is
Well,
great. Never.
they said there could be one more with the president of the East, but I don't think that's the case. They said the vice president is the last guy he thinks I'm going to have to meet with. We'll see. So, but if God's opening this door, this is a different. It's not like what I would call the perfect fit. I'm going to have to stretch a little for this job, but I'm ready for that. I know with God. I mean, what can't you do with God?
Right.
So, God will show the way, and then we'll see the blessings of God, like Naomi and Ruth did. Where a restorer of thy life. So sometimes when things are going bad, it is a trying of your faith, right? Where you things are just, God, why is this not happening? I had the whole thing planned out. My boss who retired recommended me for his job. I thought, it doesn't get better than that. The guy who left, who'd been here for 35 years, recommended me for the job. Okay, so I've got like 3 or 4 great references, but the guy who took his boss's job didn't like him, so didn't want anybody associated with him. So, and I tell you, I struggled for a while with what's going on, but I finally came to myself and said, God, whatever you got planned, I'm in. I don't know what it is. I don't see it right now, but I'm your guy. I'm gonna do what you tell me to do. I'm gonna go where you tell me to go, and I trust you. And and that's really where faith comes in. If we had all the answers, we wouldn't have need of faith. If we knew everything we needed to know, there would be no need for faith, but we don't. But we know the guy who does. And we can say, hey, Lord Jesus, be my advocate, be in there, pitching for me. And God's on our side, right? God, Jesus Christ died for us. So, but just an amazing book, an amazing, amazing book. The grace of God, the kinsman redeemer, the type of Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ redeemed us. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he hath redeemed from the hand of the enemy. We tell people about what God's done for us because you're an expert on your story. I guarantee you that Ruth and Naomi told the story of God's grace and mercy to their children and their children's children and their children's children's children. So let me close out here. Let me stop the recording.